Let's wait for the YouTube to wake up. Once the YouTube's awake, we're officially dancing and partying. It's not really any of those things, but here we go. YouTube's waking up. There we go. Yeah. Oh, that's something nice. That's something nice and pretty. That's legit. That is legit. All right, come on. Let me just see that we're all right. Just making sure everything's off without a hitch. What's up, everybody? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, good morrow. Whatever's going on where you're at, I hope it's awesome. It is Wednesday, April the 15th, in this quarantined year of our Lord 2020. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're well. I hope you're staying home. I hope you're feeling good. If you're in the United States like me, did you get your stimulus check yet? What are you gonna do with it? I haven't gotten mine yet. I'm gonna buy a yacht though. I've already decided that's what I'm doing with mine. I'm very excited. Very excited. But guys, we have a special guest today, and we're gonna get right to it because right now the amount of people completely disenfranchised with our two-party duopoly, because it's really one party and it's the money party, continues to grow every day. There's an entire new generation of people kind of looking around going, what the hell is the answer here? I don't want to pick between an alleged rapist and an alleged rapist. Where do I go? And this guy has been seeking an answer. We're going to welcome Nick Brana. Nick Brana is part of the Movement for a People's Party. He is the founder of Movement for a People's Party. Nick, good to see you, buddy.
Hey, Ron, it's so great to be with you.
Yeah, man. So we'll give people a little bit of a background. You were working for Bernie in 2016, and you saw how everything went down, and you decided, you know what, we can't do this in the Democratic Party anymore. And by this, I mean instill any type of progressive change, instill any type of meaningful change. These are just two status quo parties, and the Democratic Party in particular. They really are the Washington Generals of politics. They're set up to lose. It's by design. And whether they win or not, it doesn't really matter because their donor gravy train keeps rolling because both parties have the same owners, that being Wall Street. You really saw this and it became apparent. And I think for a lot of us, 2016 confirmed all of our greatest suspicions. Like, that's why when they talk about like, oh, party unity and this and that, I'm like, look, as an individual, as long as I've been paying attention to politics, I never felt like, oh, Democratic Party, rah, rah. I felt like, well, these guys are a little bit better than those other guys. And I think they at least want to extend an olive branch to people like me. I'm pretty sure there's a couple people bucking the trend. You know, I lived in Seattle, so I was lucky enough. Jim McDermott was my congressman. He was one of the few progressives out there. And then you found out in 2016, oh, wait a second. They hate people like me even more than the right. They want any left-leaning people as far away from them as possible. They hate us the most. That was made abundantly true to us, and it's still the case now. And so you decided to take some initiative to start seeking a solution. And in 2017, we all showed up in Washington, D.C. for the Convergence Conference to try to convince Bernie to start a new party. He said no. He did not accept our offer. But I mean, dude, I love that event so much. And I've talked about it on this show so many times because what you saw at that event, I mean, yes, we didn't get a yes from Bernie Sanders, which was the big goal. We want Bernie to say, yes, I'm starting a new party. He didn't say yes. And, but what we did have was we had a conference that was a pretty good time, but more importantly was, I mean, there were Greens there. There were DSA members there. There were environmental activists there. There were content creators there. There were journalists there. There were scientists there. There were politicians there. There were academics there. There were public intellectuals there. And everybody was having very deliberate, strategic conversations about what do we do about this. Members of the SA were there, and you kind of saw that and you're like, okay, let's just break it down, brass tacks here. Lefty people, progressives, whatever you want to call it, whatever umbrella you want to throw it all under, our numbers are not huge. That's just the reality of the situation. And I think it's because a lot of people just aren't aware of what those terms actually mean, of what those policies would actually do in people's lives. So, we got a lot of work to do as far as messaging goes. But if we all kind of work together, we're an influential faction because, well, our numbers are small. If we all have like a somewhat singular focus and are all in this together, we can actually do something.
Yeah, it was an amazing conference, and it was great to have you there, Ron. You and Jimmy and Steph did a show, and it was fantastic. And the way that it brought together people, who are on the left was beautiful too, and that's like the kind of thing that we need to see. I do kind of, have a different take from you, though, Ron, about being the majority. I think we are the majority. And
Okay.
I define that by looking at the issues. Like when you look at the issues that progressives say that they stand for, or progressive populists, it's like Medicare for all, free public college, breaking up the banks, reducing inequality, getting money out of politics. Those things are overwhelmingly favorable. It's like 2 to 3 Americans, support like each of those or more. When you get to things like getting money out of politics, it's like, it's like almost unanimous. It's like 93%. So I think what divides people, like, to kind of talk about strategy, what divides people is the labels, because people have been trained so long to like just, identify with one label or the other, like socialist, even progressive, like, okay, that's not me. I've been, trained to hate those people by the media and my political like tribe. But when you connect with people on the issues, like Bernie was so well at doing, like he did it like, like I think one of the moments when it first hit me how successful Bernie was going to be in 2015, when I joined that campaign, was when he spoke at Liberty University.
Okay.
It was like, it was a conservative college in Southern Virginia. I'm here in Virginia too, but I'm kind of I'm outside of DC, which is politically very different. And, he had people there like very supportive and understanding and cheering. And it's like he could communicate, and we've all seen those like Fox, town halls that they did where the Fox selected audience was cheering for Medicare for all.
Right. Oh
And
yeah,
so
no, totally.
I think, the coalition is there. We got to put it together.
We got to put it together. I mean, yeah, I do agree with that. My thing is though, again, it does come down to a lot of just the messaging. I think a lot of people, again, a lot of people are just straight up for Medicare for all now. The majority of people are actually for Medicare for all. But a lot of the ones that are hesitant, they're hesitant because of all the misinformation that is out there, because they've heard the message so many times. It'll cost too much. We can't afford it, that they actually believe it. Meanwhile, the system we have now actually costs a lot more than Medicare for all, and no one's excluded under Medicare for all. But so you kind of have a lot of that stuff to combat. So let's talk specifically about movement. So why can't we have the Democratic Party anymore? What's wrong with the Democratic Party? I mean, pretend you're answering a general person, not me, but
Yeah, of course. Uh, Gosh, for the last 50 years, Ron, we've been stuck in a cycle where the Democratic and the Republican parties that pretend to be two parties, but they're really one Wall Street party. They're two subsidiaries of the same parent corporation. They have had this pattern of deception against working people. That is, the Republicans will come, neither one of them serves working people. They're both completely owned by corporate money and the corporate donors, and even have corporate lobbyists, like 100 of them, for example, on the DNC. And so they're not political parties, so to speak. You can't even see them that way. They're committees of corporations. Each corporation sends their lobbyists and and then the lobbyists deliberate and they make decisions. And the rest of us are like, that doesn't serve us. And it's like, well, of course not. It's the fucking corporations making the decisions. But for the past 50 years, the Republicans have come in. They've lurched us further to the corporate right. But then what people are realizing now, I think in numbers larger than in generations, is that the Democrats come in, and rather than reversing that and taking us back to the left and kind of like expanding Social Security, re-regulating the banks, shoring up the New Deal, undoing everything the Republicans might have done in lowering taxes and starting new wars, they doubled down on that and they institutionalized everything that the Republicans did. And so you saw it in the way that it took Bill Clinton to pass NAFTA, in the way that it took Bill Clinton to repeal the New Deal, basically, financial protections, dismantle the social safety net, the way that it took Obama to basically make the Bush tax cuts permanent, to pass TPP, to institutionalize mass surveillance, to blow up the wars to a higher degree, to make sure that not only did we have too big to fail, but we had too big to jail. So there's literally no punishment for the banks that, caused millions of foreclosures. This is the pattern. And it's each successive president is really moving the country further to the right, whether it's Democrat or Republican, towards Wall Street, because health costs continue to increase, the cost of education, inequality, all of those indicators of how working people are doing just go up and up, regardless of the name, that the party of who's in power.
And then that becomes problematic too, because the people who think that this isn't just a horse race and that this isn't just political theater, they're thinking, oh, okay, well, 8 years of Obama, my life didn't get any better. So I guess progressive policies suck, because they think that's what they got under 8 years of Obama. And it's like, no, you didn't get that. You got 8 years of Mitt Romney under Obama. He did the same stuff. He did the exact same stuff. And like you said, sometimes when you have a Democrat, people go to sleep. So then these awful things that Republicans probably couldn't get away with happen. You mentioned a handful of the things under Clinton. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 also happened under Clinton. The worst media policy of both of our lifetimes happened under Bill Clinton. And then in 2016, people had the gall. Hillary supporters had the gall to complain about how the media was being unfair to her. And I would always say to those people, I was like, well, I guess it's a big bummer her husband made it a reality then. I wonder if she's mad at him for that. And then I would just I would stare at the blank look on their faces.
It's such a joke. They threw everything they had at Trump too. Yeah, you remember, and they still do. The media, billions of dollars of free advertisement trying to take him down. But people are so sick of these fake, institutions, including the media, that it's part of the reason that Trump won, in my view, is that the media was so opposed to him. Is that people said, these people on TV do not reflect my interests. They are completely detached, and I just want to stick it to them and do whatever they're telling me not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and the other thing too is, you talk about the handful of owners in this country. They own the media too. It's the same handful of Wall Street companies that own the media. They pump advertising dollars into the media to make it seem like it's sustainable, when really, like, they're just all the same owners. So all those special interests are just kept. And hey, Trump is good for ratings, and they know that. Trump's good for ratings. They like Trump. Trump's not a threat to the status quo. They know that. They like Trump. They don't have a problem with that. They're fine if Biden goes on to lose, a couple months from now, which he probably will. And, the cycle continues. And then meanwhile, they just, like, with a smile on their face, pump misinformation every day about what's actually going on.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think that we can overpower it, though, because, you look at the growth of independent media, and what happened after 2016, you've talked about this, we know this, is that in 2016, Bernie started off that race with 3% name recognition, and no money, and there was an anointed establishment candidate, and the whole political, apparatus of the Democratic Party was against him. But he still did extremely well and would have won if it wasn't for cheating, even in 2015, as well as 2020. And so what happened, a big part of that was that he essentially popularized on social media. Like social media was the platform where there was so much organic growth and like collaboration, and people were starting, state offices and like field operations, before the campaign even got to a state and during the primary in 2016, all organized on social media. After the 2016 election, the establishment realized this is a threat to us. And that's where the fake news meme came out, and the fake news campaigns, where they decided we're going to use this as a vehicle because the internet is a threat now. It's too open. It's too decentralized. People are going around the gatekeepers of information and they're figuring things out for themselves, communicating peer to peer, and like independent media channels were exploding and organizations were exploding. And so they clamped down on that with the fake news, basically mantra. And we know what's happened since then. They've tried to manipulate algorithms. They've tried to suppress channels on social media and on YouTube. But despite their best efforts, honestly, they haven't been able to prevent channels like yours, channels like Jimmy's, channels like Rising, from blowing up. And so it shows that there is like this insatiable appetite, and there is a point at which like even their attempts at control cannot hold back how infuriated people are with this system and how ready they are to produce change, like systemic level.
So where does like a new party come into that? Like, how do you fit like a new party into this scenario? I mean, obviously there's a need for it. I'm not asking that question. I'm asking strategically, how do you fit that in?
Yeah. I mean, the new party is absolutely essential at this point. It's what the majority of Americans want. Like, this is something that has shocked me, honestly, since 2017, when we started MPP. And so after I worked on the Bernie campaign, I lobbied the superdelegates for him as the national political outreach coordinator. I worked on Our Revolution, helped him found that. And then afterwards, I said, this party is too corporate. And I saw statistics also showing that almost 2/3 of Americans, want a major new party. Like, that is insane. And I thought, why in the world is the progressive movement going against the populist trend in this country? The populist trend in this country, the momentum is out of the Democratic Party. You also see it in the numbers of independents. Like, the two parties have literally dissolved over the past few years. Millions of people have left and become independents. The number of independents is now around 42%, a large plurality, versus the number of people who self-identify as Democrats and Republicans, about 27% each, And even when you ask those 27% who are like still in the Democratic and Republican Party, and they're like, do you want to be there? Or would you rather be in a different party that like, exemplifies, your views basically, and that isn't corrupt? And half of the people who remain in those parties say that they would rather be there. So it boils down to about 13% of Americans who say that they're happy to be Democrats, and about 13% of Republicans who say they're happy to be Republicans. And everyone else is saying, get me out of this nightmare. I want a different party. And so that's the opening that we have. And I cannot understand for the life of me why progressives, in a moment like this, where working people are leading us out of the establishment parties and in an independent direction, why we are there trying to contain them and prop up establishment parties and save the Democrats. I say instead, let's go with the populist current and let's form a major new party, and let's do something radical and actually give people what it is they're saying that they want. They're not saying that they want different flavors of Democrat or different flavors of Republican. No, they're saying they want a major new party, and they're saying it fiercely, because the poll that there have been numerous polls, and it's a poll after poll after poll shows majority of Americans want a major new party, and it's particularly young people and particularly working people. It's like basically the harder your economic circumstances, the more you want it. Millennials, they want it by like 71% to like, 20. And so there's this enormous just momentum in that direction now. And it's time literally it's time to embrace that, because it's time to admit that there are no paths to victory left in the Democratic Party. AOC gave up on the corporate caucus. AOC, she's giving up on primarying candidates. Bernie was screwed for the second time. Only two progressives were actually defeated establishment incumbent Democrats in Congress in all of 2018, only 2 out of 435 members of Congress. And so, like, we have got to come to terms with the fact that this strategy has failed.
So how kind of strategically would this look? Like what would be is the first step ballot access and well simultaneously membership? Like kind of walk me through just the anatomy of how a new party would form in the contemporary United States.
Right. I think that this is a moment that is essentially analogous to when the Republican Party replaced the Whig Party. There's a
Okay.
lot of historical similarities there. Inside the Whig Party, it was a pro-slavery party in the 1850s. And at the convention of 1852, the presidential convention of that party, the party's elite betrayed the base by forcing through a pro-slavery platform. And the base was solidly abolitionist. And so the base said, fuck you, and they didn't come out. And then it was a disaster for them in the election, and they lost. And then what happened after that in 1854 is that the party basically split, and that, and the split began like right there in 1852, and in 1854 they had a founding convention for the new abolitionist Republican Party, and within 4 years it had essentially replaced the Whig Party, and so it had taken their place in both houses in Congress, and then by 6 years elected Abraham Lincoln, as president. So that's the kind of timeline, and that's the kind of moment that we're in right now. And in fact, when you look at our history, there's been about 6 political realignments in the past, where the kind of access over which politics is fought has changed, and the parties have kind of either assumed different identities or been replaced. There's been a change in parties, like happened in the 1850s, and that's the kind of moment that we're in right now. So I think we can do it at that speed. It was done in Mexico also. And what it looks like is basically building the movement right now, reaching that kind of consensus and agreement and setting that direction inside the progressive movement, and as more broadly, really, as populists across the country. People who have been tricked by the right half of the duopoly as well. Like, they need to be a part of this, as well as people, who've been deceived by the Democratic Party into thinking that one of these two parties supports them. And then we need to have a founding convention. We need to have a founding convention basically immediately after this election. We need to be planning for that. And then we need to run candidates beginning in 2021, get ballot access beginning at the end of 2020 and 21, and then move up to competing in the midterms at every level, from from Congress down on to local races, school boards, city councils, and then compete for president in 2024 and replace this party in the same way that it was done in the 1850s and in the same way that it's being done in other countries now at lightning speed, powered by the internet.
Sign me up, but
Done.
Well, and we don't have to get like we don't have to get like super nitty gritty here, but like as far as like ballot access goes specifically, like is there like what are the common hurdles for that typically? Because I know there's like some, I know the Green Party pretty much has access in about 48 states. I know the Peace and Freedom Party, they have access here in California, but I don't think they're everywhere yet. Or, well, I know they're not, but I think they're in about 8 states or something like that. So what is kind of the procedure to, secure that ballot access typically?
Yeah. In the US, ballot access is a state-by-state process.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it means is that every state has a certain level of signatures, amount of signatures that are required to be collected like by a certain due date. And when you add it all up, it's about 1 million signatures that you have to collect, 800,000 to 1 million, and you should
Per
collect
state.
No, that's
Okay. Total.
cumulative,
Okay.
cumulative.
Right.
Yeah, the whole country.
I was gonna say that's a lot.
It's a lot, but
It's still a lot. It's still a lot no matter what. But per
right.
state, that's an awful lot.
But look at, for example, what happened in Florida for the Felons Rights Restoration Initiative. like they got more signatures. They got more than 1 million in one state just for that one initiative. And so that's one example of how eminently doable it is. And the other, which may be the best, is the fact that the Green Party does it, and they don't. They're probably going to be on fewer state ballots this time than they were in 2016. But part of that is because of coronavirus and difficulties doing basically ballot access petitioning. In this time. But the fact that they've been able to get on to nearly every state ballot, and that the laws for getting on the ballot actually have gotten easier since then, in a number of states that were kind of really the more difficult ones, they do that with almost no resources, with an annual budget of $300,000 to $400,000, with no paid canvassers, with one or two maybe paid staffers. And so that goes to show that with a really relatively small level of organization, the ballot access is eminently surmountable. It can be done. And so now you start talking about like, gee, what if, a progressive populist movement, what if the progressive movement was doing that? What if you had some major, independent progressive figures on board, and what if you had some major organizations on board? Then you're just blowing the level of organization and resources out of the water, because $300,000, $4,000, like that really is not that much in politics. It's nothing compared to what the establishment parties do.
Mm-hmm. So, well, speaking of which, so when people say, well, why don't we just green enter? What is your response to that?
Yeah. I think that the Green Party, going back to this analogy of the 1850s, I think it fits as well. There were abolitionist parties before the Republican Party came about, and they helped lay the groundwork for the Republican Party, for a breakthrough party. But in the end, they themselves were not the breakthrough party. And so this was in particular the Liberty Party, the Free Soil Party. They were around for years before the Republican Party came about, and they helped kind of cultivate this the idea of an independent party. And they supported, being in favor of abolition before the Republican Party came about. But what it ultimately took to break through is it took a new party that came about at the right political moment, and it split one of the establishment parties, and that's the kind of thing that only a new party, we think, can do in this moment. And historically, that's what's been successful. When you look abroad, when you look at Mexico, when you look at Spain, when you look at France, Greece, the parties that are succeeding, also the new parties, because establishment parties are collapsing, particularly center-left parties in those countries, then the parties that are succeeding are also new parties. It's not the parties that have been around for a long time. And so there's an attraction to a new party, basically, to doing something new that creates a sense of possibility that doesn't exist when you're talking about something that's been there for a long time. It's a known quantity, and that's not to say that that I don't appreciate and admire what the Green Party has done. I think it's incredibly admirable, and in 2016, I supported Jill Stein. But in this moment, the social science lends itself to saying that a new party, can be more successful, as does the international examples. The other thing, Ron, the other part of that is that a new party, to be successful, it has to invite all of the working class, including people who are, consider themselves to be on the right. And so it has to have a populist identity, because they're being screwed by the same medical bills and student debt that the rest of us are, and low wages, and that's what it's going to take to carve out this new coalition in the United States, essentially. And that's not kind of how the Green Party has really placed itself.
So someone like me, where, after like this whole experience in 2020, I kind of decided I'm gonna be. I mean, I've always kind of been more of a cause guy than a candidate guy. Like net neutrality is really important to me. Municipal broadband's important to me. Most of my uh, activist energy, or whatever you want to call it, it goes there. I was part of a campaign for net neutrality with Fight for the Future. I'm trying to get municipal broadband in my community. That's not super active right now because of the coronavirus, but I really hope to get back to it. And I kind of decided after this whole 2020 debacle that, what, from now on, that's where my energy goes. I'm going to, whatever money I have to give, it's going to go to a cause, not a candidate. And whatever canvassing energy I have to give, it's going to go to a cause, not a candidate. Because when a candidate makes a decision that I think is not the right path, I don't have anything to say or do about it. There's nothing I can say or do about it. But a cause, well, that's a cause. And I know the cause I'm working on. So, to me, that's kind of where I want to go. How is Movement for a People's Party, for someone like me, like, given that scenario I just described, why is Movement for a People's Party the solution for me electorally? Why should I put my electoral energy there?
Yeah, well, to start, what we're doing is essentially we're saying that it's not just enough to create a new party. We have to redefine what a party is. And so we've been taught in the United States that a party is this like thing that you just, it's a spectator sport. You just cast, you pull a lever, cast a ballot every 2-4 years, and that's your role in it. You have no role in decision making. You have no role in like creating, a meaningful platform, picking the leadership. And that has to change, And so what we're doing as the Movement for a People's Party is we're organizing in a decentralized way, using self-organizing systems. This is a horizontal form of organizing where like leadership is elected, it's accountable, like the platform is actually meaningful and candidates are held to it. And where, of course, there's no corporate money or influence whatsoever, and as like a part of a movement party philosophy, we also believe in direct action. Like at the same time, like we believe in supporting and being there in solidarity and working with movements that are working on issues, directly. Like, for example, the rent strikes now, we have an action working group. And so we're dedicated institutionally to doing that and supporting that and making that happen, like pushing towards a rent strike and a general strike on May Day when already a third of people couldn't pay their rents. Imagine what it's going to be like in May. But like, I would also say that we can't, essentially, we have to push on multiple different fronts. We can't give up on anything like electoral politics, and we can't say like, no, it's all just fucked. Instead, we can make progress if we form a new party, and the left takes that on, and progressives take that on, and populists take that on across the country. That is going to be an explosive transformation in US politics, because it is either going to replace the Democratic Party or it is going to force them to change. And frankly, I think that it's going to replace them. I think that they're going to go down with the ship. So at this point, it needs to be a collection of tactics, essentially. We need direct action. I completely agree with that. And we need to support issue campaigns. But we also have to, bear in mind that if there's no one in the political lane or basically in the political apparatus that we have in this country, then that is it's kind of like a vacuum that the establishment is going to fill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I wasn't implying that I was like never gonna, have a toe in electoral politics at all, or I wasn't gonna vote or anything like that. I just meant like as far as my direct energies, it's gonna go to a cause. So well then let's talk a little bit about the platform. I know you have an open, evolving document on the Movement for a People's Party website, but let's get into some specifics. What are some of the policy platforms going on, or some of the policies that are part of the Movement for People's Party platform?
It's very much essentially Bernie's platform from 2016 and now. And so it's very similar to that. And we go further on some issues, like we support public banking, but Medicare for all, I mean, is beyond obvious that we need that now, you know, particularly in this crisis. Free public college, abolishing student debt, a Green New Deal, you know, ending all fossil fuel subsidies, ending the wars, all of them, a massive transfer of, you know, slashing the military budget essentially and reinvesting that in the United States. Actually, strong surveillance and data protection laws, you know, which both parties have normalized mass surveillance, going with Obama, you know, and also breaking up the big banks and actually regulating them with a financial transactions tax, for example. Also, a universal basic income, because if we had had that before this crisis, imagine how much better off people would have been. And we need it to deal with automation too. Like, people wouldn't have been dependent on their employers. And we're in this amazing like transition period in human history where agricultural work has been automated. You know, it used to be in the 1800s, it used to be 80%. In the early 1800s, it was 80% of Americans who worked agriculturally. Now it's 2%. After automating agriculture, we've automated and outsourced manufacturing. And now we're automating services. It's the service industry. And so that means that there will essentially, there won't be enough jobs left for people. And then the kind of like fundamental exchange that that's at the heart of our economy, which is trading people's labor for income, you know, which they then use to buy like basic goods, that's going to break down. And so we need some way of providing for people that is not through jobs and through wages. And that's a universal basic income. We also support an economic bill of human rights, which is the one that Franklin Roosevelt was talking about as early as 32. But he talked about when he gave a speech on what is the post-war world going to look like in 1944. You know, in the United States, he focused on a second bill of economic human rights, and he talked about we're going to provide all the necessities of life for free for people: food, water, housing, you know, care for people who become older, for for the elderly, medical care, recreation. He said freedom from monopolies and corporate dominance.
Mm-hmm.
If all of that was possible in 1944, just think of the explosion of wealth and technology since that time, and we could easily provide that for everyone in this country.
Are you for extensive rent control?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Because I'm one of those people. I'm for a jobs program, but I'm for a UBI too. But I'm not for a UBI without extensive rent control. Like, I'm not for I'm not for a UBI in the sense that Andrew Yang was for a UBI. I'm
Yeah.
not for that. I'm for a different type of UBI, but I'm for a jobs program too, because I think that when you're talking about a completely reinvestment of our energy infrastructure and how we do things, which we need to sustain the planet, I mean, I think despite advancements in technology, which is part of the conversation, I don't disagree with that, but I think even despite that, you're still going to have a big need for jobs that need to be filled. You're talking an extensive rail that we used to have in this country that we need to rebuild for today's environment. You're talking about, wind, solar. You're talking about just, reinvesting our priorities in this country. I mean, I feel like the jobs will certainly be there, and it's all part of the conversation. Like, it's not like they don't have to be this or this. It can be both. It just has to be unrolled the right way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we think that that a jobs guarantee and a universal basic income are complementary. They're not in competition, and that we should have both. Because like you say, there's a lot of positions, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We need to transition to a green economy.
So where can people get involved with this? Like where can people go right now if they want to get involved with Movement for a People's Party?
Go to peoplesparty.org and sign up
Peoplesparty.org.
there on our homepage. Sign up to volunteer. Yeah, you can plug into events that we have. We're having weekly onboarding meetings and bringing people in.
And
We're
that's done
organizing.
online, I take it.
It is it's all being done online. That's right. Now we're doing everything online.
Now, these signatures that you would need to gather for ballot access and stuff like that, could that be done online? Is that a possibility, or does that have to be done like physically?
It has to be done physically right now, but
Okay.
that's being challenged.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. So peoplesparty.org. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we dismount here?
Yeah, I would like to say we just came up with, we have a petition that is a declaration of independence from the Democratic Party. It's an open letter to the DNC where we declare our independence from their corporate party. And I would encourage everyone to sign up on it and to join us there and to really show the establishment that we're done with them. And that's at demexit.us. That's where you can sign on. And I would also say that, like, look, it might have been worth giving it a try inside the Democratic Party, but now we're at a point where, like, we wanted a presidential candidate in 2016. It was rigged. After that, we said, well, gee, let's try to get some like meaningful platform changes. It turned out the platform wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. After that, we said, let's try to get a DNC chair. They rigged it. They kicked out Keith Ellison. They put in Tom Perez because it's the donors that make the choice and the superdelegates that make the choice. After that, we said, okay, well, let's try to replace the DNC members. In the fall of 2017, the DNC just removed the progressives who were on the national committee, like James Ogby and others. They just took them out. A completely illegitimate move. After that, we said, well, 2018 is coming up. Let's see if we can get some progressives elected. It turned out after more than 100 progressives ran for Democratic seats, only 2 of them unseated establishment members of Congress, AOC and Ayanna Pressley, less than 1% of the caucus. And then we thought, well, why don't we change the rules for the presidential race so that it's more fair, so that Bernie stands a chance or a progressive stand a chance this time? And then they rigged the Unity Reform Commission at that point too. And they put all 30 establishment members on the Rules and Bylaws Committee, and they made the process even more rigged for 2020, the primary, than it was in 2016. And so, like, they eliminated the caucuses, for example, kept joint fundraising agreements. So here we are back in 2020 saying, well, let's run a presidential candidate. Once again, rigged. And so the process of trying to reform the Democrats has come full circle now, and it hasn't worked. There's no path forward. Even the progressives, the best ones like AOC, have abandoned primary challenges. They've abandoned forming a corporate caucus. So there is literally no path to victory inside the Democratic Party and the establishment party anymore. So I'd say let's do what the people are actually telling us to do at this point. Let's go with the populist progressive current out of the parties, as the majority of Americans want, rather than us basically siding with the establishment parties and trying to contain people.
So I just thought of one last question that you helped me remember that I forgot to ask prior. So, when you're talking about all these things, which are all true, how do we really combat issues of election integrity? Because it's one of those things. I mean, with a new party, if they still rig the results, if they still, stifle voters, if they still do all these things they're notorious for doing, well, then, we're still kind of like up the creek without a paddle, so to speak. So how do we really tackle issues of election integrity to know that future candidates, which may be MPP candidates, get a fair shake in an election?
The best way to do that is to build a movement that wants essentially a new party, that wants an alternative. Give people a stake in and make them really invested. Because right now you have the biggest group of voters in the United States is non-voters, independents and non-voters. If you re-inspire, because they've made a rational calculation that there's no one in this race anymore who stands for me or seems to have like any chance. And so if you give people something to fight for, and you galvanize them, and millions were to join a new party, then you would have the biggest election integrity movement, that the country's ever seen, demanding paper ballots and accountability.
All right. Nick Brana, Movement for a People's Party. Go to peoplesparty.org and demexit.us. Nick, thanks so much for joining me today, man. I appreciate it.
Great to be with you, Ron.
All right, cheers, buddy. All right, that was Nick Brana, everybody. Always an interesting chat. Always a very interesting chat. And again, that's peoplesparty.us if you want to learn more about the Movement for a People's Party. I'm going to see what you guys are saying. First of all, Graham Elwood and myself, we have our next show coming up this Saturday. We're going to be doing our Zoom shows on Saturdays pretty much as long as this thing goes on. Like, as long as this quarantine is going on, we're going to be doing shows on Saturdays, unless for some reason, some Saturday, one of us can't do it. But we're quarantined, so we probably can do it. So this next one's coming up. It's Saturday. From now on, the time is always going to be 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific. So mark your calendars now, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. You can get tickets for this Saturday at ronplacone.com. Go ahead and grab them. They're only $5. And then what happens is you'll get the Zoom link sent to your email account, your email address, about an hour before showtime. Let's see here. Hussein, what's up? You should prop progressives to run for office in every district. I feel ya. Coclo27. Thanks for this important topic. I really appreciated this conversation. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it as well. I appreciate you saying that. Allison, I'm wondering about the organizational structure. Do you have volunteers signing up? Yes, I'm pretty sure they do. And you can learn more about that at peoplesparty.org to find out, what they're doing and how they're going about trying to build a new political party in the United States, which we do so desperately need. Hussein, Koklo, Allison, thank you very much for your Super Chat contributions. Final announcement, if you are so able and interested, patreon.com/Ron Placone. For a Give What You Can level, you get all kinds of exclusive content, including a patron Zoom show once a week. I do a Zoom show just for the patrons once a week. I do a stream for the patrons once a week where the replay is only available on Patreon. And there's other writings, there's podcasts, there's videos, there's full stand-up clips not available anywhere else. You can download my album. It's a ton of content for a Give What You Can level, and it helps me expand this show. I'm trying to do those. I'm going to do those documentaries for municipal broadband. I'm going to keep doing the Sounds of Revolution series where I interview musicians. Unfortunately, that's all going to be remote now, but it is still gonna happen. Guys, thank you so much for being part of this. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're all staying well. We are all we got right now. And, stay safe out there. Stay safe, stay home, stay well. General strike now. You know the drill in the meantime. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Shahid Buttar is going to join the show tomorrow. He is the person who's running against Nancy Pelosi in California's 12th, and we're going to be talking about digital rights issues that are going on right now amidst the pandemic. That's going to be a really interesting conversation. He's an expert in that topic. Until then, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace. Peace.